All right. Who's ready for Candid Ethan? We're talking about hypecasting, and boy, has uh, the weather socials been a dumpster fire over the past couple of days. As of the recording of this video, we have potential tropical cyclone 9 that is between Yucatan, Cuba, south of that. And it looks like it's going to head into the Atlantic and potentially be a major hurricane at landfall somewhere on the Gulf Coast, most likely between the Florida Panhandle and the western Gulf Coast of Florida. I would say I started noticing the trend in hype casting over the past couple of years, probably since like the post-COVID era, particularly because that hurricane season was so bad. But it seems like with each of the major storms that have happened, it's like sequentially since then, it's like the social media kind of rampant. I don't want to use the term misinformation because, yes, I guess some of it is, but that term is thrown around so much. But nonetheless, it's like, hurricanes are such a easy fear-mongering buzzword, I guess, that it's easy to garner attention from it. And I think a lot of what we're seeing with hype casting is ultimately a result of the human condition. Why I think that is because the human craves dopamine, and the human is in a world now where there is so much stimulus and we can get dopamine very easily, and social media is a great way to get dopamine. If I make a post and I post a screenshot of a worst case scenario hurricane on my Twitter, people are naturally going to gravitate towards it and engage with it. And I get the feedback of, ooh, likes, views, whatever, right? And sometimes there's monetary incentives behind that. There's also the conversation too of YouTube thumbnails, but honestly, I think if you're getting your information from YouTube thumbnails, that's kind of a user issue. You have to advertise your videos somehow, and it's the number one, kind of way to advertise your video. And it's more of a, you can't hate the player, you hate the game type of thing. So the forecasting channels that do those kind of clickbaity type thumbnails, I can't fault them too much, especially being a weather content creator as well. So, that's kind of its own different subset. But a lot of what I'm talking about is like what's on Twitter, on Facebook, on TikTok, I guess, too. I'm not on TikTok very much, so I don't really know what's going on over there. But it's probably a lot of doom and gloom, random people talking about it. So let's get into what a lot of these posts are about. A lot of these hype casting type things are honestly just model screenshots. So ultimately, what a lot of people do is they use atmospheric models, which are a fantastic tool for forecasting. But the general public doesn't realize that those atmospheric models are not a forecast. It's a model. It takes inputs, does a bunch of math, gives you outputs. Models are not the actual real world. And of course, you're going to get not a full realistic output. So if I take a screenshot of a sub 900 millibar storm and just throw it out into the world, being someone that's associated with the weather world, and some people that aren't versed in weather see that post, they're going to be like, oh, this is bad. And the ramifications of an overreaction are pretty bad. And ultimately, too, you're clogging up the channels of communication, and it becomes very unclear what is reliable information versus what's just a engagement type thing, whether it be intentional or unintentional. To quote statistician George E.P. Box, all models are wrong, but some are useful. And what we're seeing a lot nowadays with forecasting is a lot of Modology versus meteorology. Now, what do I mean by that? Basically, people are using the models primarily as their forecasting tool versus traditional forecasting means. So kind of working more off the foundational understanding of meteorology, kind of starting with the initial inputs and going from there and kind of forecasting based on what's happening in the real world, rather than just loading up a model viewer and then just clicking the slider through and seeing what happens, right? The model should be more of a final step type of thing, because you can find if things are initialized wrong, pretty easily if you have a full understanding of what's happening now. So a lot of these things get into kind of forecasting philosophy, but nonetheless, what we're seeing a lot of is a lot of modology being posted online, and most people cannot discern what is modology versus meteorology. And that is problematic for a whole host of reasons. I think this is particularly problematic with hurricanes because of the fact that hurricanes are probably the biggest impact disaster in the United States. Hurricanes affect thousands to millions of people, right? Depending on where they make landfall. And during the forecast phase of it, kind of tracking where it's coming, especially multiple days out, millions of people are in the potential path, right? If you are confusing the people that are trying to get reliable information for the sake of their safety, so people all along currently the Gulf Coast of Florida, and they're trying to get information in, granted, there's a lot of, reputable sources that are out there, but if you're just filling the void with noise, it's hard to discern what to act on, especially at this point in the forecast where there's a lot of uncertainty. You're going to get this giant, massive evacuation of people, and you're going to get a Hurricane Rita type of situation where so many people are trying to evacuate. More people die in the evacuation than in the hurricane itself. And that's dangerous. And the people that actually need to leave, once the hurricane gets close and you kind of know the general vicinity of where it's going to be, say a 50-mile stretch of coastline where the worst impacts are going to be, it's going to be harder to evacuate the people that need to be evacuated when you have a 300-mile span of people evacuating the same routes. The ramifications of, hypecasting are pretty significant, and it's irresponsible and reckless, in my opinion, to be making a lot of claims that can be misinterpreted by the general public. My own personal philosophy here is I'm a professional engineer. I am not a trained meteorologist. However, I have done a lot of undergraduate work as an engineer in the space of mesoscale meteorology, so severe weather, supercells, tornadoes, and I've been storm chasing for 10 years. So in those avenues, and the fact that those types of things don't usually require mass evacuations, I'm much more comfortable to speak on those subjects, those being engineering and mesoscale meteorology, given the fact that I've had experience in those fields, both in a professional and hobby setting. Whereas hurricanes, yes, I'm interested in hurricanes, but I don't forecast for hurricanes. I don't have experience forecasting in hurricanes in a professional setting. And because the impacts are so great with them, it would be irresponsible of me as someone in the field of weather adjacently, whether it be through engineering or, kind of the content creation thing, where people see me as a source of information, but I know that it is responsible of me to not disseminate information that could be misleading to the public. I think that's extremely important, and I take that seriously, and I think a lot of other people should as well. Here are some of the reliable sources that I go to for tropical meteorology, obviously the National Hurricane Center, but I included a couple other people in here as well that have quality information about hurricane forecasting and have been doing it for a long time and do it as their profession. So these are the people that I look to, and I often, republish or repost whatever their stuff in the forms of retweets or whatever to get the information out there. All right, so those are my thoughts on hypecasting, hurricane forecasting. I don't know. It's just something that I think should be thought of more carefully. And we have to be aware of the fact that, yes, we have human desires for dopamine and stuff like that. I really do think that's a pretty big component. And I think the thought of us like, oh, I'm going to help by posting this. Like I said, a lot of it could be unintentional, right? But yeah, it's a tough thing. And I think we just all have to be a little bit more responsible when it comes to disseminating information, particularly about hurricanes. All right, that's it for this one. Subscribe to the second channel if you're stumbling across this for the first time. That'd be greatly appreciated. That's it from me. Peace.